Hi, I'm doing the final exam review, and this right now we're looking at chapter 2, which doesn't have a lot in it, but there's a couple of things. One, we're looking at linear equations here, and linear equations are something that you're supposed to have had in previous classes. That's why we don't spend a ton of time on it. And this one it says find the intercepts in graph. Remember that the x-intercept is what you get when you make y 0, and the y-intercept is what you get when you make x 0. X-intercept we abbreviate with a lowercase a and y with a lowercase b, just for future reference. So what do you get if you make y 0? Well, make y 0, that's going to make that term drop out, and you get 3x equals 6. Divide by 3, and you get x equals 2. You can just do that by the cover-up method. That's really easy. Then what if you make x 0? If you make x 0, then that drops out, and you get negative 4y equals 6. Divide both sides by negative 4, and you get y equals negative 3/2. To graph that, you would plot those 2 points. For the x-intercept, I had 2, and for the y-intercept I had negative 1.5, and that would be my graph. Make sure that you use the intercepts when you do that problem, else it will count it wrong. This one says find the equation in slope-intercept form given 2 points. You're going to first find your slope by subtracting your y's on top and your x's on the bottom. Notice I'm subtracting a negative. I've got to put that in there. That gives me a slope of negative 7 over negative 3, or 7/3. Now I'm going to use the point slope equation. I have y minus, I'll use this first point, y minus 3 equals 7/3, x minus negative 1, which is plus 1. And then I'm going to distribute that. And then I'm going to get the y by itself because I want slope-intercept form. That's y equals mx plus b, right? And so I need to then add 3 to both sides. And y equals 7/3 x. 3 is the same as 9 over 3, plus 9 and 7 would be 16/3. You can definitely use your calculator to add those two things together if you don't remember or aren't good with fractions. Okay, so now the last thing about chapter 2 is just talking about the slope of a line. If you see a line that rises from left to right, we say that has a positive slope. If you see a line that falls from left to right, we say that has a negative slope. You should be able to look at a line and say whether it's negative or positive. If you have a line that's horizontal, if you think about your slope is always the rise over the run. If you have a horizontal line, you should see that there's no rise. It's just flat. And so that means you have 0 over some number, which I'll call r, and 0 divided by anything is 0. So a horizontal line has a slope that's 0, whereas a vertical line does have rise, but it has no run. You're not going left or right there, so you're dividing by 0. What happens when you divide by 0? You get something that's undefined. And so we have undefined for a vertical line. We have m equals 0 for a horizontal line. We have a slope of negative for a line that's falling from left to right, and a slope that's positive that's rising from left to right. And I also think there is a linear application. I don't remember writing. I don't know what I've done with that. I guess it's from chapter 2. This is chapter 2. Oh, I did the last page of chapter 2 first. That's okay. We're going to go backwards because I just realized there was a whole nother page of chapter 2. Well, that's the end of chapter 2. That should be reviewed, though. All of chapter 2 should be a review, except the function notation might be a little new to you. So let's look at the first page of chapter 2. Sorry to go backwards. if you're plugging in a value to a function, you're just going to replace that value in your expression. Notice that every time I write that value in, I'm putting a parentheses around it. That's -3 times 4 plus 8 plus 5, and that's -12 plus 8 plus 5, and that would be -4 plus 5 is +1. And over here, I'm putting in -3b, and that would be -3 times -3b squared minus 4 times -3b plus 5. Notice the parentheses around everything I'm plugging in. And that looks like -3. -3 to the second power is 9. And then -4 times -3 is 12. And -3 times 9 is -27b squared plus 12b plus 5. And that is that. Nothing else you can do. These are not like terms, so you're just ready to move on. In this one, use the graph to determine 4 things. And this one might be broken up into separate problems on your test. But the first one says, and actually it will say like this, y equals f of x equals x, like that. It could be y equals x or f of f equals x. But what about f of -2? Well, that means you put an x for -2. So you come over here to -2 and you're saying, what's the value of -2, of the graph when x is -2? And I didn't draw that very well, but it was supposed to be 1. Doesn't look like it exactly, but it's an exact graph on your test. That one is telling you what the x is, and then you find the y. Now, opposite of that, here, they're not telling you the x, they're telling you the y. So they say, what when y is 0? Well, y is 0 here on the x-axis. So x could be 2 things. It could be -3 or 2. And of course, on Math Excel, they always want you to put a comma between those with no space. So the first one's telling you what the x is, you're asked to find the y. The second one's telling you what the y is, you have to find the x. The domain are all the x values. You can see that we're going from -4 up to, oh, you can't see that, up to +4, sorry, and but we don't include this one. So the domain is -4 up to 4, but we are including this one. So there's an equal to part. So the domain is the x's, and we're going from there to there. Now for the range is the y's, and you always want to make sure that on the y's you're doing the negative to the positive, even though it seems a little awkward at sometimes. But this is supposed to be the lowest value, and then this is supposed to be the highest value. So for the y, the lowest value is -3. It's got a solid, so I'm going to put the equal to part there. And the highest value is at 2, and also that is solid, so that has an equal to part. So that's what you're going to do, knowing those 4 things for given some graph. Okay, and then the last one was the one I was thinking, oh, I thought there was a linear model here, and here it is. So this is the m of x, 3.5x plus 472 models the number of bachelor's degrees earned by men X years after 1980. I think that's supposed to be in thousands, so I didn't write that in there, but whatever. We could say in a particular state or something. But so what is the slope? Well, the slope is right here. The slope is 3.5. That's the number that's next to the variable, and interpret that slope. And there's a multiple choice on the final, but what we're saying is that there was an increase of 3.5 per year since 1980. All right. So the x is the number of years. So like 5 years later, you'd say 5 times x, times 3.5 plus 472. And then what's the vertical intercept? Vertical intercept is the y-intercept if you think about the horizontal and vertical lines. So it's the y-intercept. The y-intercept is down here at the end. So the vertical intercept is 472. Interpret what that means. That means in 1980, 472 men got their bachelor's degree. Okay, so that we're just seeing if you know, if you look at that, can you tell what the slope is? Can you tell what the y-intercept is? Y-intercept, vertical intercept, either one. All right, that is really now all of chapter 2. Have a great day. I'll see you next time.